He thought embarrassing the quiet woman would entertain his guests, but before the night was over, every fork in the room would stop in midair. The rain had just begun to fall over downtown Chicago when the glowing sign of the ivory table reflected across the wet sidewalk like a promise only the wealthy could afford. Inside, crystal chandeliers shimmered above white linen tables, polished silverware, and glasses so clear they looked invisible beneath the golden light. The city's elite filled the dining room in tailored suits, pearl necklaces, and low, confident laughter, while servers moved like clockwork between tables carrying plates that cost more than some families spent in a week. In the center of it all ruled Chef Victor Langford, a celebrated name in fine dining, a man whose sharp jawline, pressed white jacket, and carefully styled gray hair had appeared in magazines nearly as often as his food. He loved applause almost as much as he loved control. And on this particular Friday night, both were beginning to slip. Table 12 sent back the halibut, whispered a nervous server near the kitchen entrance. Victor's eyes narrowed. Then send it again. Sir, they said it was dry. The chef's jaw tightened as nearby staff pretended not to hear. A second complaint followed minutes later. Then a third. Something was wrong in the kitchen, and everyone knew it. The room could sense it too. Conversations lowered. Glances drifted toward the open kitchen, where Victor barked orders louder each minute. Across the marble floor, unnoticed by nearly everyone, Emily Carter knelt beside a bucket and mop near the hallway leading to the restrooms. Her plain blue housekeeping uniform hung loosely on her small frame. A few strands of light brown hair had escaped her neat ponytail, and her worn sneakers squeaked softly each time she moved. At 38, she carried herself with the kind of quiet posture people mistake for weakness. She kept her eyes down, worked efficiently, and spoke only when necessary. Most of the staff assumed she was temporary. Some forgot her name entirely. Emily preferred it that way. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Victor stormed from the kitchen carrying a plate with half-eaten sea bass. Who plated this? He snapped. No one answered. His sous chef stared at the floor. Victor looked around for someone weaker than himself, someone safe to punish. His gaze landed on Emily. She had just stood, wringing water from the mop. You, he called sharply. Heads turned. Emily paused. Yes, sir. You seem relaxed while everyone else is working. A few staff members smirked. Victor stepped closer, holding the ruined plate like evidence. Maybe you'd like to help solve our problem. Nervous laughter spread from the line cooks. Emily said nothing. Tell me, Victor continued loudly enough for nearby diners to hear. Can you cook? More laughter now. Even two guests near the kitchen glanced over with amused expressions. Emily's fingers tightened slightly around the mop handle, but her face remained calm. A little, she answered softly. Victor smiled the smile of a man who thought he had found entertainment. Perfect, he said. Because in 10 minutes, my VIP guests need a replacement entree. He tossed a folded apron onto the stainless steel counter beside her. Let the janitor cook. The kitchen went still. Somewhere in the dining room, a glass touched a plate with a tiny ringing sound. Emily looked at the apron, then slowly raised her eyes to meet his. For the first time that night, something unreadable passed across her face, and the oldest dishwasher in the room suddenly stopped moving. Victor expected hesitation, tears, maybe an apology. Instead, Emily Carter set the mop against the wall with careful precision, removed her rubber cleaning gloves, and folded them beside the sink as if she had all the time in the world. The kitchen staff watched in a silence that felt louder than shouting. Steam drifted from simmering pots. Burners clicked. Somewhere, beyond the swinging doors, soft jazz continued in the dining room. But inside the kitchen, every eye stayed on the woman no one had noticed until now. Chef Victor crossed his arms. Well, he said, do not tell me the janitor suddenly lost her courage. A few nervous chuckles rose, then faded when Emily reached for the apron. She tied it neatly around her waist, smoothing the strings once before speaking. What table? She asked. Her voice was calm, low, and steady. Victor blinked, annoyed that she had skipped humiliation entirely. Table 6. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore. Anniversary dinner. They have already sent back 2 dishes. Emily nodded once. What did they order? Sea bass, snapped the sous chef, a tall man named Darren whose forehead glistened with sweat. But do not worry. We are all dying to see how housekeeping handles a 7-ounce fillet. More laughter tried to form and failed. Emily stepped to the stainless prep counter and glanced over the ingredients laid out under the bright task lights. Fresh herbs, shallots, lemons, unsalted butter, baby asparagus, Yukon Gold potatoes, capers, a tray of clean sea bass resting on ice. Her eyes moved once across the station, taking in every item with a speed that did not look rushed. The oldest dishwasher, Mr. Raymond, stood near the sink drying plates with a towel. He was 68, quiet, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. Now he stared at Emily with growing curiosity. Need help finding the stove? Darren asked. Emily ignored him. She lifted one fillet, checked the firmness with 2 fingertips, then set it down and selected another. This one, she said softly. Victor scoffed. You think fish can choose itself? Emily looked at him for half a second. No, but poor handling shows. Darren's grin disappeared. Victor's jaw tightened. She moved to the cutting board and picked up a chef's knife. Several cooks exchanged glances. The knife sat naturally in her hand, balanced and familiar. Without flourish, she trimmed the fillet in 3 clean motions, then minced shallots so quickly the blade made a soft rhythmic tap, like rain on glass. Heads turned. One server whispered, "What in the world?" Emily heated a pan, added oil, then waited. She did not crowd the moment. She listened to the metal. When the pan was ready, she placed the fish skin side down with exact confidence. A crisp sizzle answered instantly. Not smoke. Not splatter. Precision. Victor stepped closer despite himself. Lucky guess, he muttered. Emily said nothing. She pressed the fillet lightly, then began whisking butter, lemon, capers, and herbs into a glossy sauce, while potatoes warmed in a separate pan. Her movements were efficient, elegant, almost economical, as though wasted motion offended her. The younger line cooks who had laughed minutes earlier now stood shoulder to shoulder, watching as if a curtain had risen. Mr. Raymond lowered the plate he was drying. He had seen something like this once, years ago, on television. No, he whispered under his breath. It cannot be. In the dining room, a distinguished man seated alone in the corner lowered his newspaper and watched through the glass partition separating guests from the kitchen. He wore a navy blazer, silver-framed glasses, and the expression of someone who missed nothing. Emily plated the fish with clean lines, spooned the sauce in a perfect crescent, placed the asparagus like brush strokes, then wiped the rim of the plate with a folded towel. She slid it forward. Even Victor did not speak for 2 full seconds. Then he forced a laugh. Fine presentation, he said loudly. Let us see if it tastes like anything. But the room had already changed, and everyone could feel it. The server carrying the plate moved as if transporting something fragile enough to break the entire room. No one in the kitchen returned to work. Burners stayed lit, timers blinked, sauce reduced unattended, but every pair of eyes followed the dish through the swinging doors toward table 6. Chef Victor wiped his hands on a towel and straightened his jacket, forcing confidence back into his posture. This ends in 30 seconds, he said loudly. Then everyone gets back to real work. Yet even he did not sound convinced. Emily remained at the station, calmly rinsing the knife she had used. She did not look toward the dining room. She did not wait for praise or fear. Criticism. She simply cleaned as though the most important thing in the world was leaving a workspace better than she found it. Darren stared at her. Who taught you that plating? He asked before catching himself. Emily set the knife down. Someone patient, she replied. Mr. Raymond nearly smiled. Through the glass partition, the Whitmores examined the replacement entree. Mrs. Whitmore, elegant in a cream-colored dress, leaned closer first. Her husband adjusted his glasses. They exchanged the wary look of people who had already been disappointed twice. The server stepped back. Around them, nearby diners slowed their conversations to watch without pretending otherwise. In the corner booth, the distinguished man in the navy blazer folded his newspaper neatly and gave the plate his full attention. Mrs. Whitmore lifted her fork, cut into the fish, and paused when the skin cracked with a delicate, crisp sound. She tasted one bite, then another. Her eyes widened slightly. She set the fork down and looked at her husband without speaking. Mr. Whitmore sampled his portion, then closed his eyes for one long second. In the kitchen, someone whispered, "Say something." They did. Mrs. Whitmore raised her hand. Victor exhaled with satisfaction and strode toward the dining room doors, already preparing an apology wrapped in excuses. Before he could reach them, the server rushed back inside, breathless. "They want to compliment the chef." The kitchen froze again. Victor stopped mid-step. "Of course they do," he said quickly, recovering himself. "I will handle this." "No," the server said, glancing nervously at Emily. "They asked for the woman who made it." A hush fell so completely that even the vent seemed quieter. Victor's smile held for a second too long, then cracked at the edges. "There must be confusion." "There is not," came a new voice from the doorway. The distinguished man from the corner booth had entered the kitchen uninvited. Staff members recognized him one by one, and their faces changed accordingly. Charles Monroe, the most respected restaurant critic in the Midwest. A man whose reviews could fill reservation books for months or empty them overnight. Victor straightened instantly. "Mr. Monroe," he said, forcing warmth. "Had I known you were dining with us, that is precisely why I did not announce myself," Charles replied. His tone was calm, but the room leaned toward him anyway. He stepped past Victor and looked directly at the plated station, the trimmed herbs, the wiped counter, the still warm sauté pan. Then his eyes settled on Emily. "Who are you?" he asked. Emily dried her hands on a towel before answering. "My name is Emily Carter." Charles studied her face as though searching an old memory. "Have we met?" "No, sir," she said gently. "But years ago, you reviewed a restaurant in Boston called Maribel." Charles went still. Victor frowned, uncertain. Mr. Raymond gripped the sink edge. Charles took one slow breath. "Maribel closed 12 years ago," he said. Emily nodded. "Yes. And there was only one chef there who could make beurre blanc taste like that." Victor's confidence drained by degrees. Darren looked from Charles to Emily and back again. Charles lowered his voice. "That chef disappeared without explanation." Emily met his gaze steadily. Some people leave rooms where respect has expired. No one moved. No one spoke. And for the first time in many years, Chef Victor Langford looked like the least important person in his own kitchen. The silence after Emily's words carried more weight than any shout ever could. Steam curled from the pans. A ticket printer buzzed once and went ignored. Charles Monroe kept his eyes on her, the look of a man rearranging years of assumptions in real time. Chef Victor recovered first, or at least tried to. He gave a practiced laugh that landed nowhere. "Well," he said, smoothing the front of his jacket. "What a charming coincidence. Talent clearly recognizes talent." No one joined him. Darren lowered his gaze. Two line cooks suddenly found urgent interest in polishing already clean utensils. Victor stepped closer to Charles with the smile he reserved for investors and cameras. "Mr. Monroe, had I known tonight was an inspection, I would have personally prepared our seasonal tasting menu." Charles did not turn toward him. "I did not come for a performance," he said calmly. "I came for dinner." The words struck harder because they were quiet. Victor's jaw flexed. "Of course." Charles looked again at Emily. "Why are you mopping floors in Chicago when you should be running kitchens in New York or Napa?" Several staff members inhaled at once. Emily folded the towel in her hands. "Because titles are loud," she said. "Peace is quiet." Mr. Raymond let out a soft breath that sounded almost like pride. Charles nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she had said. "And yet your hands still remember everything." "Hands remember what the heart once loved," Emily replied. Victor stepped between them with polished urgency. "Emily has been a valued member of our team for months," he announced. Heads turned sharply. Everyone in that kitchen knew he had learned her last name less than 10 minutes earlier. "We believe in giving opportunities here." Emily said nothing. Charles finally looked at Victor. "Do you?" The question hung in the air like a blade made of manners. Victor's confidence slipped again. "Naturally." Charles glanced toward the dining room. "Then perhaps your guests would enjoy meeting the person who rescued their anniversary dinner." Victor forced another smile. "There is no need to disrupt service." "Service was already disrupted," Charles replied. She restored it. Through the glass, diners had begun openly watching the kitchen. Phones rose discreetly. The Whitmores stood from their table, smiling toward Emily. Mrs. Whitmore even applauded once before stopping, unsure if it was allowed in such a place. Charles stepped aside and gestured toward the dining room doors. "Miss Carter." Emily hesitated only briefly, then untied the apron and laid it neatly on the counter. She smoothed her housekeeping uniform instead. That small act said more than any speech. She would enter as herself, not in borrowed authority. As she walked through the doors, conversation throughout the ivory table thinned into murmurs, then disappeared altogether. Chandeliers glowed overhead. Servers froze mid-step. Guests turned in their seats. Emily crossed the room with the same modest posture she had used while carrying cleaning supplies, but now people made space for her, as though instinctively recognizing something rare. The Whitmores greeted her warmly. "That was extraordinary," Mrs. Whitmore said. "Best meal we have had in years." Mr. Whitmore nodded. "You brought grace to a room that had lost it." Emily thanked them with a gentle smile. Then applause began at one table, then another, then spread across the restaurant until the entire room was clapping beneath the crystal lights. Some guests rose to their feet. Victor remained in the kitchen doorway, rigid and pale, hearing praise in his own dining room that was meant for someone he had mocked. Charles Monroe watched him without sympathy. "A kitchen reveals character faster than fame ever will," he said quietly. Victor swallowed. "I can explain." "No," Charles answered. "You already did." Emily turned back toward the kitchen, not triumphant, not angry, simply composed. She walked past Victor as if passing furniture. For a man who had spent years demanding attention, being ignored was the sharpest lesson of all. The applause faded slowly, like rain moving down a long street, but the atmosphere inside the ivory table never returned to what it had been. Guests spoke in hushed voices now, glancing toward the kitchen with a different kind of curiosity. Servers moved more carefully. Even the clink of silverware seemed restrained. Respect had entered the room, and arrogance suddenly looked out of place. Emily returned to the service hallway and reached for her mop exactly where she had left it. She adjusted the handle, dipped it into the bucket, and resumed cleaning a small section of marble floor near the coat check. The gesture stunned everyone who saw it. She had just received a standing ovation in one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, yet she returned to unfinished work without a trace of performance. Charles Monroe watched from several feet away, hands in his coat pockets. "Most people would be asking for business cards by now," he said. Emily continued mopping in smooth strokes. "Most people mistake attention for opportunity," she answered. Charles smiled faintly. "And what do you mistake it for?" She wrung out the mop. "Noise." In the kitchen, Victor barked orders with forced intensity, trying to reclaim rhythm through volume. "Move, move, move. We are 20 minutes behind." But no one responded with the same fear as before. Darren obeyed, yet his eyes kept drifting toward Emily. The younger cooks whispered less and listened more. Mr. Raymond washed pans with a small private smile. Something invisible had broken, and everyone knew it. Victor marched out to the hallway, lowering his voice when he saw Charles nearby. "Emily," he said, suddenly warm, "I may have misjudged your experience. Clearly there is room here for someone of your background." She kept working. "My background is housekeeping tonight." He laughed awkwardly. "Let us not be dramatic. I am offering you a line position. Immediate pay increase. Full benefits. Devastating. I have reviewed restaurants for 30 years. Men like you believe cuisine is built on ego. It is built on discipline, consistency, and the treatment of those who cannot help your career." No one spoke. Even the dining room seemed to quiet again. Victor looked smaller somehow, though nothing about his height had changed. Emily picked up the mop once more. "I did not come here to be discovered," she said. "I came here because I needed a steady paycheck after caring for my mother through her final illness. Life becomes simple after certain losses." The softness of her words struck harder than accusation. Darren looked ashamed. Mr. Raymond wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist and returned to the sink. Charles nodded slowly, understanding at last why someone brilliant might choose invisibility. Emily resumed mopping the marble floor, and every stroke seemed to polish the room more honestly than all its chandeliers ever had. The next hour unfolded under a strange new gravity. Orders still came in, burners still flared, servers still hurried between tables carrying trays balanced on one hand. Yet something essential had shifted inside the ivory table. People who had once moved from fear now moved from awareness. Voices softened. Doors were held open. "Thank you, and please" appeared where commands used to live. Even the air seemed clearer. Emily finished the last stretch of marble near the hallway and wheeled the bucket toward the storage closet. Before she could reach it, Darren stepped in front of her. Earlier that night, he had laughed louder than anyone. Now he looked like a man trying to stand correctly inside his own regret. "Miss Carter," he said, the words unfamiliar in his mouth. "May I take that for you?" Emily studied him for a moment, then released the handle. "You may," she said. Darren rolled the bucket away without another word. Three younger cooks watched the exchange in silence, learning more from it than from any recipe. In the kitchen, Victor attempted to restore authority through perfectionism. He corrected garnish placement, criticized sauce texture, adjusted plates that needed no adjusting. But his commands landed weakly now. Respect had left the room, and authority without respect is only noise. Charles Monroe remained at his table, slowly finishing dessert and observing everything. When the check arrived, he signed it, then requested one final meeting before leaving. Victor hurried out first, posture sharpened, smile rehearsed. "Mr. Monroe, I trust we can discuss tonight in context. Service challenges happen even at the finest establishments." Charles folded his receipt and set it down. "They do." Victor relaxed slightly. Then Charles continued. "Character failures happen more often." The smile vanished. Several nearby diners pretended not to listen. Charles stood and buttoned his navy blazer. "I will write honestly about what I saw." Victor's face tightened. Surely one misunderstanding should not outweigh years of reputation. "Reputation," Charles said calmly, "is what people say in bright rooms. Character is what you reveal when stressed." He glanced toward the hallway where Emily was replacing clean towels on a service cart. "Tonight your dishwasher had more leadership than your executive chef." Victor swallowed hard. "You would destroy a business over one incident." Charles looked almost disappointed. "No, Chef Langford. People destroy themselves in moments. Reviewers merely describe the smoke." He walked toward the exit as a hush followed him through the dining room. Phones were already glowing at tables. Staff knew what tomorrow could bring. Victor stood motionless for several seconds, then turned sharply toward the kitchen. "Everyone back to work," he snapped. No one moved faster. No one flinched. Mr. Raymond continued rinsing pans at the same steady pace. Darren finished a sauce before answering. "Yes, chef." It was obedience stripped of fear. Emily pushed the linen cart past Victor without slowing. He stepped aside instinctively, then seemed startled that he had done so. Near closing time, Mrs. Linda Hayes, the restaurant's managing partner, arrived unexpectedly in a charcoal coat and heels that clicked across the marble like punctuation. She was a practical woman in her 50s who rarely visited during service unless something serious had happened. She took one look at the staff, at Victor's face, at Emily folding napkins in the hallway, and understood that the room had a story. "Office," she said to Victor. No raised voice. No drama. Just one word. Victor followed her immediately. Through the glass walls of the small office, staff could see animated gestures from him and stillness from her. Emily continued folding napkins into clean triangles. 5 minutes later, Linda stepped out alone. She approached Emily with measured respect. "Miss Carter," she said, "would you join me for a moment?" Every head in the restaurant lifted. Victor remained inside the office, seated now, staring at the desk in front of him. Emily set down the final folded napkin and nodded once. The room went silent again, because everyone sensed the next decision would matter far beyond one restaurant. Linda Hayes closed the office door softly behind Emily, shutting out the kitchen noise and the dozens of eyes trying to read the future through glass. The office was elegant in the restrained way expensive places prefer to be. Darkwood shelves, framed awards, a single orchid on the credenza, numbers organized in neat folders. Success arranged to look effortless. Linda removed her coat, hung it carefully, and motioned toward the chair across from her desk. "Please sit." Emily remained standing for a moment, then took the seat with the same calm she had carried all night. Linda studied her, not with suspicion, but with the attention of someone realizing she had missed an important detail in plain sight. "I have reviewed labor files on everyone in this building," Linda said. "You listed prior experience as catering assistant, meal prep, and private care work." Emily folded her hands in her lap. Those were true. Linda almost smiled. Accurate and incomplete. A dangerous combination. Through the glass wall, Victor could be seen seated stiffly in the hallway chair now, no longer inside the office. His white chef coat looked less like authority than costume. Linda noticed Emily glance once in that direction. "He will wait," she said. "He has kept others waiting long enough." Emily said nothing. Linda opened a folder already brought from the front desk. Inside were printed articles she had requested in the last 15 minutes. Old reviews, archived interviews, faded magazine covers. She slid one page across the desk. On it was a younger Emily in a black chef jacket, standing beneath the words "Rising Culinary Vision of Boston." "You were 30 years old," Linda said. "James Beard semifinalist. 2 years later your restaurant closed after your business partner disappeared with the accounts." Emily looked at the page only briefly. "Yes. You never publicly defended yourself. There was nothing public worth saving." Linda leaned back slowly. "Most people would have sued, toured television studios, sold a memoir, blamed the weather, blamed investors, blamed everyone." Emily's expression stayed soft. "Most people need to be remembered." The room went quiet. Linda tapped another article. "Then your mother became ill. You sold your home and vanished from the industry." Emily nodded once. "Caregiving is full-time." Linda's voice lowered. "I am sorry." Emily accepted the words with a small incline of her head. "No performance. No bitterness." Linda closed the folder. "I built restaurants for 27 years, she said. "Do you know the rarest ingredient I have ever found?" Emily waited. "Humility with skill." Outside the glass, staff pretended to polish cutlery while watching every movement. Victor stared at the floor. Linda continued. "Chef Langford will be placed on immediate leave pending review." Emily's face did not change. "That decision is yours." "It is." Linda folded her hands. "The next one could be ours." She slid a keycard across the desk. "Executive kitchen access. Temporary consulting authority beginning tomorrow morning. You may redesign systems, train staff, and determine whether this restaurant deserves to keep serving people." Emily looked at the keycard but did not touch it. "You offer power quickly." Linda nodded. "Because I recognize when I am late." Emily almost smiled for the first time that night. "And if I decline? Then I will thank you for exposing a problem money did not notice." Linda paused. "But I hope you do not." Emily stood and walked to the glass wall. On the other side lined cooks. Straightened unconsciously. Mr. Raymond stopped drying a plate. Darren lowered his eyes. Victor remained seated, suddenly interested in nothing. Emily saw not a famous restaurant, but tired workers, young apprentices, and people who had forgotten what leadership looked like. She turned back. "One condition." Linda nodded immediately. "Name it." "No one loses hours because they treated me kindly tonight." Linda answered without hesitation. "Agreed." "Second condition," Emily said. "Mr. Raymond gets an assistant on weekends." Linda smiled fully now. "Already approved." Emily picked up the keycard at last. In the hallway beyond the glass, heads lifted one by one. The room did not cheer. It did something rarer. It exhaled. The next morning, Chicago woke to rain-washed streets and a headline that moved faster than traffic. Charles Monroe's review of the Ivory Table appeared online at 6 a.m. It praised one extraordinary dish, questioned years of complacency, and ended with a sentence people repeated all day. Great restaurants are not saved by stars, but by those they fail to see. By 8:30, reservation lines were flooded, not with cancellations as Victor had feared, but with curiosity. The city wanted to know what would happen next. Inside the restaurant, the chandeliers were off, the dining room empty, and sunlight filtered through tall windows onto silent tables. Staff arrived early, whispering in pairs, checking phones, rereading the review, glancing toward the kitchen doors. At 9 o'clock sharp, Emily Carter entered carrying a plain canvas tote bag and a notebook with worn corners. No dramatic entrance. No entourage. No designer coat. She wore a clean navy blouse, dark slacks, and practical shoes. Yet every conversation stopped when she crossed the room. Linda Hayes met her near the host's stand and handed over a printed schedule. "Your team is assembled," she said. Emily glanced at it once. "Not my team," she replied. "Our team, if they choose it." Linda nodded, understanding the distinction. In the kitchen, Victor's framed promotional photos had already been removed from the wall. Pale rectangles marked where they had hung for years. Darren stood near the prep station, with two younger cooks, suddenly unsure where to place their hands. Mr. Raymond arrived in a fresh apron, beard neatly trimmed, eyes bright with cautious hope. Emily stepped to the center of the kitchen and looked around the room that had mocked her less than 12 hours earlier. Stainless counters gleamed. Knives were lined precisely. Yet she saw what mattered more than surfaces: fatigue, tension, talent hidden under fear. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was gentle enough that everyone leaned closer. "Before menus, before standards, before technique, we begin with names." She pointed softly around the room. "You first." One by one they introduced themselves. Not titles. Names. Miguel. Tara. Denise. Owen. Darren. Raymond. Even the interns spoke. When it ended, Emily repeated every name back correctly. Several people straightened without realizing why. To be remembered is its own form of dignity. She opened her notebook. "Today we change 5 things." She wrote on the whiteboard in clear block letters. Hot staff meal. Posted schedules 1 week ahead. Respectful communication. Cross-training for growth. Clean stations before pride. Some exchanged glances. It sounded simple. That was why it mattered. Darren cleared his throat. "What about the tasting menu for tonight?" Emily handed him a crate of onions. "First, we learn how this kitchen tastes when no one is angry." A few smiles appeared before being hidden. She assigned stations quickly, not by favoritism, but by strength she had observed in a single night. Tara to sauces because her palate was sharp. Miguel to fish because his knife cuts were naturally clean. Denise to pastry support because she organized instinctively. Darren to prep beside her. He looked surprised. "Prep?" Emily nodded. Leadership begins where ego ends. No one laughed at him. That made it land harder. By noon, the kitchen sounded different. Not louder. Better. Questions were asked without fear. Corrections came without humiliation. Mr. Raymond had an assistant and spent half his time teaching efficient dish flow to a grateful 19-year-old named Caleb. At 1:15, Victor Langford entered through the back door in street clothes, carrying the stiffness of a man who expected his old world to pause for him. Conversation stopped. He looked at the removed photos, the rewritten board, the staff working without panic. Then he saw Emily tasting soup with Tara and discussing salt levels as equals. "I need to speak with management," he said. Emily did not turn around. "Management is in the dining room," she said calmly. "The kitchen is busy." The room went silent because everyone understood what had just happened. For years, Victor had treated others as interruptions. Now he had become one. That evening, the ivory table opened under a different kind of light. The chandeliers still glowed, the linen was still pressed, and crystals still shimmered on every table. But luxury no longer felt like the main attraction. Something steadier had replaced it. Guests arrived not only for status, but for the story now moving across Chicago with the speed of rumor and the weight of truth. They had read Charles Monroe's review. They had heard that the kitchen had changed overnight. They wanted to see whether dignity could really alter the taste of a room. By 6 o'clock, every reservation was full. By 6:15, people were waiting outside in the drizzle for cancellations. Inside the kitchen, no one shouted. Tickets printed and were acknowledged clearly. Stations were clean. Pans moved with purpose. Questions were answered without sarcasm. Mr. Raymond, now working beside Caleb, hummed softly while racks of spotless plates rolled by in smooth rhythm. Darren called times with measured confidence instead of panic. Tara corrected a sauce and thanked the cook who pointed it out. Emily moved through the kitchen in a plain apron, tasting, adjusting, teaching, never performing. She did not need to be the loudest person in the room because competence speaks in complete sentences. At table 12 sat Charles Monroe again, this time openly, notebook beside his water glass. At table 6, the Whitmores had returned and requested whatever Miss Carter recommends. In the far corner, Linda Hayes watched service with folded arms and the rare expression of relief. Shortly after 7, Victor Langford emerged from the dining room office carrying a small box of personal items. The room noticed him all at once and pretended not to. He no longer wore a chef coat, just a dark overcoat and the uncertain posture of a man meeting consequences without applause. He paused at the kitchen entrance, looking at the brigade working smoothly without him. For years he had mistaken dependence for leadership. Now he saw the difference. "Emily," he said quietly. She turned from the pass where she was checking plates. Everyone within earshot became very interested in their tasks. Victor stepped closer, holding the box against his side. I was wrong. No excuses followed. No speech about pressure. No mention of stress or standards or misunderstood intentions. Just 4 words, stripped of decoration. Emily regarded him calmly. Yes, she said. It was not cruel. It was accurate. Victor lowered his eyes, then gave a short nod that looked more honest than anything he had offered in years. I hope you do better with this place than I did. Emily glanced around the kitchen. That depends on everyone here. Several staff members straightened. Victor looked as though he wanted to say more, then thought better of it. He left through the back corridor with no audience and no applause. The door closed softly behind him. Service continued. At 8:10, Charles Monroe requested to meet the kitchen. Staff gathered reluctantly, wiping hands on towels, aprons dusted with flour and steam. Charles stood near the pass and looked at them one by one. Last night, he said, I witnessed a talented woman rescue a failing dinner. Tonight I witnessed something rarer. A team restored by respect. He turned to Emily. Will you remain here permanently? She smiled faintly. For now, there is work to do. Charles nodded as if that was the best answer possible. His second review published the next morning with a new headline. The Ivory Table learns to see. Reservations booked